got lost.
I think I'm going to introduce you, don't you?
Oh, you're going to introduce me?
Okay.
I think it's introduction.
Exactly.
But thank you. He probably said afterwards we can have an introduction.
Yeah. He's in the mode, he's ready for it, and me too.
In 1992, which is a long time ago, probably before you were born, I wrote a book called Mimesis and Alterity. And a lot of people like the book. I like the book. It's very simply written. And it was, how did I stumble into it? I read an article at the back of a book of Walter Benjamin's essays that no one ever talked about, at least back in the 80s, and in English. And it's called On the Mimetic Faculty. And I read it, and it's only 3 pages, and I was blown away. And I kept thinking about it. Put it a bit further away.
Yes.
Yeah. And Benjamin wrote this article in 1932, 33, on the island of Ibiza. He had no money, absolutely no money. He was living in great poverty, and a friend had invited him to the island for the summer. Before he wrote this article, he wrote another one called On the Doctrine of the Similar. And his claim was that a long time ago, human beings had a very sharp eye for similarities. So they might see my face in the cracks in a building over there, or they might see a similarity between the leaves of a certain tree and the liver. It's not something that I myself have, but I'm trying to imagine times when, a long time ago, when people could see patterns and compare them with other patterns and find the similarities. So the doctrine of the similar. I think he was also very interested in astrology and the relationship between things that in themselves are not physically similar, but you can connect them, like the time when a baby is born and the constellation in the stars, and then you read this for your horoscope. So here we have the constellation of the stars, one thing. We have the date of birth, another thing. Very separate, but they're combined through astrological reading. So one thing is actual physical resemblance. That's the kid doing a windmill. Another one is the more complicated, mediated similarities. So he pulls this together 6 months later and on the mimetic faculty, and he says something like, all of nature, so I think of rocks, I think of palm trees, I think of the ocean, I think of people, I think of dogs, animals and so forth, but he says all of nature has this mimetic capacity, but particularly human beings, and particularly through language. And he talks about how kids at his time, in his knowledge, sort of it's like Belgium or Germany in the 20s and 30s, kids have this mimetic faculty. They love becoming something else. So this a central part of the definition was that if you copy something, you become that something. If you copy something, you take something of its power. You don't take the power away from it necessarily, but you get it shares its power with you simply through the act of imitation, mimesis, imitation. Okay, and then he says in ancient Greece, for example, in antiquity, in the dancing, in the study of the stars, in the divination, opening up a guinea pig and looking at the entrails to read if this person is sick, what are they sick from, is it sorcery, and so forth and so forth. Reading reading the future through an animal's insides. These are all examples, the dance, the kid doing this. And he says, well, what's happened to this capacity? The kids have it, they still have it today, but they lose it. It's present in magic in all parts of the world, but magic is considered very suspicious. So the essay goes on to talk about, first of all, what a marvelous thing this mimetic faculty. And he equates it definitely. You're not just imitating, you're imitating in order to become that which you are imitating. Okay. Now, Deleuze and Guattari, when they talk about the wasp and the orchid in Proust, in Thousand Plateaus, they're very scornful of mimesis. You know, Deleuze is famous for his book on repetition and difference. And both he and Guattari, who co-wrote Thousand Plateaus, they say, oh, mimesis is sort of for dummies. Mimesis is stupid because mimesis just repeats. And I'm saying, no, I can't agree with that. You got it wrong because you underestimate this magical quality of imitation, this magical quality of the mimetic. This built into it is this becoming the other. Well, that was in 1932, and of course, expressions like the other, becoming the other, have, through identitarian politics, carry a huge polemical weight, right? Something you might want to think about. One of the subtexts of this essay, for our purposes, is that Benjamin wanted to say language is built around the mimetic capacity. And of course that would have been considered complete garbage. That would have been considered extremely nonsensical or hard to accept, especially in our day and age, with the emphasis on the arbitrariness of the signifier and that view of language, that language is one thing, reality is another, and so on. But that was part of this sort of strange materialist approach to language. I'm not going to talk about that today. I just thought you should know that he was actually building up to this very radically different concept of how to think of a language, and so forth. Now today, what are we, 2019, I have this, I don't know how I got this idea, I can't justify it really, must have just come, the following idea, that with what I call global meltdown, you know, the end of the world, apocalypse, all of that. So I see the apocalypse as having two dimensions. Everything has two dimensions. One is the environmental destruction that we live in, and the other is the political destruction that we live in. You know, the word Trump. And you put these two together, the Trump factor and the environmental factor, you've got something very, 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 very heavy going on, okay? I call it meltdown. And I had this idea that with meltdown, the world becomes re-enchanted. You know, when I was younger, about your age, occasionally I would read about this German poet, Schiller, crying, talking about the disenchantment of the world, that the fairies have gone, that the spirits have gone. You know, we've just got machines and people, secular, and enlightenment has destroyed all the magic. And, you know, he's weeping these tears. And it's called the disenchantment of the world. And a lot of sort of macho people get into that and say, yes, the world is just barren of spirits. There are no more fairies. There are no more goblins. There are no more pixies. There are no more witches. You know, it's all over. Just got to grit your teeth, says Max Weber. It's all about rationality. It's all about bureaucracy. etc. Well, I think now the world has become re-enchanted as a result of this catastrophic collusion, catastrophic combination of very violently destructive politics and a violently destructive environment. And I also think, but this is nothing, I mean, I shouldn't even spend time on this. I also think that this notion of the disenchantment of nature, Schiller, late 18th century, I think it's very exaggerated. I think disenchantment always coexisted with re-enchantment. But let's just make a clean presentation here. So once upon a time there was disenchantment. Now as we approach, what about re-enchantment? But this is a re-enchantment of a special sort. This is a re-enchantment that I call of the negative sacred. Evil. Georges Bataille, in several ways, for example, in the College of Sociology in Paris in 1939, he and his group of sociologists and one woman called Laure, L-A-U-R-E, they used Durkheim, they used surrealism, they used Marcel Mauss to try and talk about what they call sacred sociology. And my understanding is that this was, first of all, they were just fascinated by the sacred, and secondly, I see it as a research project, an intellectual group tie to figure out some basis for fascism, if you like, populism. What's turning people on with this Hitler guy and this hatred of this group and that group and the other group? Is there a sort of theological, religious passion behind this? Well, we're very much in those times now, it seems to me. So the College of Sociology is concerned with the sacred, but particularly, I think, with what I will call the negative sacred. If you like, hell, the devil. The sacred is always highly ambivalent anyway. Attraction, repulsion, God and the devil. I mean, these very powerful forces. Durkheim gives you this picture in the elementary forms of religious life that as you approach the altar, you're attracted to the altar, you can pull, but you also push back. Pull, push back. This attraction, repulsion. He said it was like electricity. Well, I don't know if you get attracted, I guess, to and repulsed, but, there's an invisible charge there. Can do wonderful things, can do terrible things. Let's just leave it at that. So I see the re-enchantment of nature as built around what I call the negative sacred. I also see it as amplification of the mimetic faculty. Weird, right? It's like going back to that book in 92, and I'm sort of thinking to myself, I wonder if the world is becoming more animistic, i.e. things have spirits, things have spirit power, they're not just things anymore, which was what Schiller was crying about. It's not dead nature anymore, it's live nature. How many books have been written in the last 5 years about nature is alive? Jane Bennett's book, Vibrant Matter, for example. I mean, she's clever and she talks pretty much a secular talk, but basically I would say it's like now suddenly we see in our age of crisis, we're doubtful, or we're actually doubtful that nature is dead. And I'm saying, so I think animism is very much magnified, both in our minds in our conferences, our journals, and all of that, but also as a thing. I mean, we're looking at nature now as animated, or we're dimly aware. It's gradually gone. And the main component for me was a multiplication, an amplification of what I call the mimetic faculty. Now, if you see all of nature, including humans, and the animals, and the plants, and the stones, and the cars, and the toaster, as forming networks in your daily life, for example, you could draw a network of all the things that you come across and maybe interfere with, or that interfere with you. And I'm sort of thinking that there's a doctrine of the similar, that there's a mimetic connection between all these different things, and this is being magnified by the crisis. So, if I was to describe this talk to you as a mix of science fiction, the weather, and high theory, that might put you in might make you feel better about the excesses of the talk. So you just think of the talk as science fiction, the weather, crazy weather, and what was the other thing? Oh yeah, high theory. I thought I might start off with this picture of my friend Simran Gill in an oil palm plantation in Malaysia. We were visiting an oil palm plantation because I was writing a book about palm oil. I don't know if you know much about palm oil, but it's like a heavy topic now, destroying the rainforests, and most of you people are buying it because they have great contracts with the Economic Union to sell the stuff. Indonesia, Malaysia, and now Latin America. So these nuts that she's holding come from these palm trees, and a special type of palm that produces a yellow-orange oil. Well, when the chemists treat it, it comes out as orange. And from that oil can be made just about anything, starting with diesel fuel for motor vehicles. But it can also be my fingernail polish, it can also be the paints, it can also be, they say something like 50-60% of the stuff in the supermarket has got a palm oil palm basis. And the market for palm oil is very strong, and the crop is spreading and spreading and spreading. In Colombia, where I work, live a lot, it not only destroys the forest, but it also destroys the peasants who are living there. And they cleaned off the land, and they cleaned off the land by and large by paramilitaries, armed paramilitaries. And these paramilitaries are, to my mind, very scary, and they're supposedly connected with the police, with the army, with the mayor of the town, the governor of the province, a cabinet minister here, a cabinet minister there, maybe even the president, like this President Uribe, who had 2 terms, which is unheard of in Colombia. He's supposed to be closely associated. Everything about the paramilitaries is like talking about ghosts, and nothing is certain. All you know is they're scary, that their strategy was to come into villages with photographs, open up a computer, they had ID numbers, maybe photographs, and they might massacre the whole village. They might just pull these people out, and they use chainsaws, and they would use a chainsaw. They sometimes cut your arms and legs off while you're alive, and put your body on a barbed wire fence, and then they disappear. And then, you know, maybe you have a cell phone, if it's not too remote, and someone says, oh, we think the paramilitaries are going to attack tomorrow, next day. And then another friend says, no, that's not right. Then a third friend says, it could be right. So you live in this continual blur of uncertainty. So, there's Simran becoming a palm tree. So here we have someone doing imitation, someone doing mimesis. She doesn't know my theories of mimesis or anything. she just makes this up on her own bat. Her name is Simran Gill. She's Sikh, born in Malaysia, and lived a long time in Australia, then back to Malaysia, now back in Australia, and she's a famous artist. So she's becoming a palm tree. So I have this sort of picture in my mind. Okay, that's Simran. And I call this art. And then I have a martini glass. Oh, I've actually got colours here. So this is palm oil. And from this you can get diesel, you can get everything in the supermarket, you know what I mean. So she's becoming palm. She's mimetically capacious under the heading of art and politics. This palm oil is extremely mimetically capacious. You've got all these bright chemists who come from all over the world, and they get to Malaysia, or they're Malaysians, and they figure out what's the next product we can put on the market that this tree produces. So it's like magic. You know, it's like a kid's book on magic. You can make anything, let's say. So this is super mimetically capacious, and when I looked at the photographs in the Colombian book on palm oil, I saw something like this, and I said, well, it's just like a martini glass. And so I call this chemistry. So, and I want to stress the movement backwards and forwards between this art and chemistry. And the mimetic power. And then over here, again reciprocating back and forth, I've got the paramilitaries. And they're mimetically capacious because they become invisible, they become visible, they might be here, they might be there. Are they connected with the president? Well, so-and-so says so, but so-and-so says not. And so your head is always going like that. So I have this, so I'll call this politics. That's my three connections. Now, I described each one of these, the paramilitaries, the oil, and the artist, as mimetically capacious, as mimetically powerful. So much so that we could introduce a new concept, and that is the metamorphic sublime, or if you like, metamorphic sublimity. It's playing with the English language, and I don't know if English is probably a second or third language for a lot of people here, but it sounds strange in English, and it sounds strange in really interesting ways. So we've gone beyond mimesis. We've gone making copies, and the copies make not copies of copies, but they're similar things. It's like a snowball. And it's so intense, it's so ubiquitous, I call it the sublime. Like the sublime is something awesome, you know. So this is like mimesis on steroids, or mimesis accelerated. So I use this fancy term that I make up, the metamorphic sublimity. Now, I see this metamorphic sublimity as part of the re-enchantment of nature, and I stress again that the re-enchantment is negative, has this negative quality. And I have two points of reference. So one will be what I call shamanism. I'll put it in commas. And two will be us. Put that in commas too. Basically, I'm referring to, I don't know what I'm referring to. I haven't got a name for it. I want to call it the state, the modern state. I want to call it Trumpism, post 9/11, surveillance. This world we live in, everybody's involved, is caught up in this, the surveillance camera and the post 9/11, I don't know what to call it, super state. I'll call it the state, but it's much bigger than the state. If you think of shamanism as something very old, commas again, this is very new. For example, it has a lot to do with Facebook, the digital world, stuff like that. Now, why do I bring in these two factors? It's because, I'm not happy with the term shamanism, and we could go into that, but I'll use it as a shorthand. I invoke shamanism because I'm very intrigued by sorcery, and I'm very intrigued by the gossip and the rumor and the uncertainties about involved with shamans and sorcerers. The shamanism that I was working with in the Putumayo area of southwest Colombia for a long time, from 1972 to 99, provokes images in ritual with shaman song, and the body is quivering like this, and people come and they talk about their sadness, things that have gone wrong with their children or their marriage and so forth, and they think that so-and-so is responsible. And the shamans that I know, their job is to sort of block that from happening anymore. You never know. There are lots of stories about shamans who, curing somebody, actually destroy them. I mean, there's an example of, you never know which foot you're standing on. In other words, I'm thinking of shamanism itself as the great model for the metamorphic sublime. Now, this is just one person, maybe an old man or an old woman with 6 patients on the edge of the forest or wherever it might be. But what if we expand this? This is the perfect core, if you like, the perfect, Weber would say, ideal type of metamorphic sublimity, and we expand it to our world today. So I use this as a model for thinking about modern politics, the culture of modern politics, the culture of modern power. One of the things that years ago, when I was reading the classic texts on shamanism by Levi-Strauss, The Effectiveness of Symbols, for example, or The Sorcerer and His Magic, reading Franz Boas, the German US anthropologist who in a way started modern anthropology period, but certainly in the US. He has a famous text called How I Wish to Learn the Ways of the Shaman. And it's written by Kwakilo, Northwest Coast, US, Canada, long-term correspondent called George Hunt, whose mother was Indian, his father was a Scottish trader. And Hunt wrote this, 20-page essay about what it was like to become a shaman. And Evans Pritchard, a British anthropologist, has a famous book called Oracles, Witchcraft and Magic Amongst the Zandi, 1937. Now, in all those famous texts, and E.B. Tyler, the father of anthropology, the first professor at Oxford, wrote a really clever, sensitive book, 2 volumes, called Primitive Culture. In all those texts, something very weird is going on. No one believes really in the shaman, but everyone believes or thinks it's possible. But Evans Pritchard put it very well. Belief and skepticism go hand in hand. I think we need to have in the window. I'm feeling a bit hot. Could we get some air in? Could you guys by the windows? And we'll have a little break.
I felt the same thing about your work.
They don't open? Yeah, beautiful.
This one as well.
Can you open that one at the back too? Hugo, good. Yeah. Beautiful. You can't open it? It's locked? Well, this one's open. That's good. Okay. Okay. In all these classic, famous descriptions of shamanism, you find actually people are very suspicious and at the same time given to belief. It's really split. And as I was reading all the different accounts on top of my own experience, for instance, the Kwakilo will conceal a worm in their mouth, and at a certain point in the curing of somebody will be sucking their body, and they'll pull out a worm, as you hear, but they had it in the mouth all the time. This sort of thing. And you say, well, how can people be so stupid? The anthropologist sees it. Surely the people who are living there see it and a lot more. How do you explain this? Evans Pritchard has this classic thing of a Zandi witch doctor who conceals a thorn in a ball of grass and wipes somebody over, and a lot of ritual, and then says, wow, I pulled this out of your body. And Evans Pritchard says, yeah, but it was in the ball of grass all the time. You say to yourself, well, what's going on? So I came up with a formula of skilled revelation of skilled concealment. Skilled revelation of skilled concealment. And in all of what I'm saying here, especially with the metamorphic sublime here and here and here, I don't know about chemistry, I became very sensitive to the awesome power of trickery. Skilled revelation of skilled concealment is one aspect of trickery. It's like the art form of trickery. You could say she's performing skilled revelation of skilled concealment. And so I wanted to think of our modern age as involved in this skilled revelation, this shamanic magic of skilled revelation, of skilled concealment. One last word before I start is I want to remind you of this famous text called Dialectic of Enlightenment by Max Horkheimer and T.W. Adorno, in which they say throughout history, from the go-get, starting with the shamans, ending with the atomic bomb, this is my reading, not only has the mimetic faculty been paramount, playing with all those atoms to blow up the Japanese, hold off back the Russians, and so forth and so on. But the shaman with the rattle, searching for rain, or searching for that thing inside your body that is making you and your family so ill. My reading of the motif is the domination of nature. The history of the world is the domination of nature. They write this book, it's published in German in 1945. The Nazi thing is uppermost in their mind, but their sense of history is much, much longer. Thousands of years, if you like. The domination of nature. Well, we're sort of used to that, I mean, with the environmental movement. You might say, so what's new? But to me, it always seemed weird, because it's such a simple formula. The history of the world is the domination of nature. So you might say, okay, let's have a discussion. How do I stop the domination of nature? I'm green. I don't want nature to dominate anymore. You can also read this book, Dialectic of Enlightenment, as adding what they call, at one point, discussing Nazi rituals, the organization of mimesis. So I'm going to say, putting myself, out of it, domination of nature requires the organization of mimesis. In other words, all our technology, from the shaman trying to get rain to the atom bomb, is the organization of mimesis. And that includes, well, there's not much it doesn't include. So my project would be, hey, what about the disorganization of the organization of mimesis? The disorganization of the organization of mimesis. You can read the history of power, the history of technology, as the organization of this mimetic faculty, so that you get your pound of butter, you get your weekly wage, you get a tram, whatever it is, built, iron foundries. They're all built out of putting together mimetic processes. That's what the understanding is. It uses, put it another way, it's using mimesis instrumentally. It's using mimesis in a utilitarian way, not for its own joy, its wonder, its miraculous powers. I am a windmill. It's using this to make a profit, you might say. It's using this to achieve an end. And Nietzsche, in his distinction between the Dionysus in the Twilight of the Argos, his last book, Dionysus is absolutely identified as a mimetic crazy guy. Can't stop imitating, Nietzsche says. He's always jumping into another skin, I think is what Nietzsche says. And that's very different, that mad impulse through dance and liquor and so forth, Dionysus, bravery, live for the moment. That's very different to the more quote-unquote bourgeois, stand back and let's figure out how we can get this mimetic stuff to work for us. That he calls, in another context, ressentiment. So that's a way of unpacking. So that's what I have to deal with if I'm going to talk about undominating nature. My you can tell I'm in a tight corner. I'm looking for the right color. My idea is if with global warming, let's call it meltdown, there's an increase in the mimetic faculty. Now, that's like intuition, or it's an axiom, hypothesis, whatever you call it. I'm interested if it can increase to such an extent that you get mimesis of mimesis. I'll try and explain it a little. To such an extent, and as opposed to domination, you get mastery of non-mastery. It's all a bit bizarre, right? Makes perfect sense to me, though. So this is really the goal at the end of the rainbow. To get to some anarchic, unstable, never-ending, ceaseless mastery of non-mastery. So, if the mimetic faculty is used throughout history in a functionalist, instrumental way, what if we could convert that mastery into the mastery of non-mastery? That's a paradox, right? That's a sort of mind twister, and it's meant to be. It's meant to be. So this is my goal. Now, have any of you seen the film by Jean Rouge, Les Maîtres Fous? Could you put your hand up? Oh, everybody. And what about the film Trobriand Cricket? Yeah. In both those films, made at the point of independence from European colonial power, the Jean Rouge in Ghana, 1955, and the Trobriand film 15 years later, someone with a movie camera, Jean Rouge, for example, in Ghana, is filming people, in this case migrants from Niger, who become possessed, as a group performance, become possessed by the spirits of the French colonial masters. Jean Genet was so impressed with this that he made a film out of it called Les Nègres. They become possessed by the spirits of the French colonial masters. Their eyes you see the whites, their mouths froth, some of them have toy guns, others are abject on the ground. And they enact what could be seen as a parody, what could be seen as a parodic copy of colonial power as they experienced in Niger. And at one point in the film, an egg is cracked over the head of a statue of somebody called the governor. The governor, presumably the white governor of the colony of Ghana, colony of I don't know what. And then the filmmaker, back in Paris or somewhere, looking at the film, then cuts the film at that point, and has another film, joins the other film, like this, and the next bit will show you the real governor of Ghana getting out of a big black car at an official ceremony, a parade, trooping of the colour, I think they call it. And as he gets out of the limousine, long black limousine, you see this incredible hat that he has, and the hat comes down over his head like this, and the bottom feathers, it has ostrich feathers and other sorts of feathers. The bottom spray of feathers is all white, and the top spray of feathers is all yellow, just like the egg on top of the head of the governor. Now, these people from Niger, men and women, mimicking the French colonial officers, including the train engineer. Jean Rouch, the filmmaker, he can't get possessed. He doesn't come from a culture where people become what we call possessed by spirits. But he has the next best thing. He has the movie camera. So these people, they're mimetically capacious, and he has a mimetically capacious machine. And when he puts the breaking of the egg over the governor's head with the real governor, that's what I call mimetic excess. Suddenly you became aware of mimesis, quote unquote, in itself, as a power taken away from the instrumental functionalist properties of mimesis. So I'll give you that little story, that picture, as an example of mimetic excess, which would be mimetic excess is mimesis of mimesis. And I think in there, the domination of nature using mimesis can be replaced by what I call the mastery of non-mastery. I see the mastery of non-mastery as an ethic, maybe political ethic. No more masters, but you can't just get rid of masters, they always come back. They always come back. So it's a continuous thing, and that's why you have this paradoxical loop. Now, I call it MNM, to be smart, master of non-mastery. The MNM weaving of doing and outdoing mastery. But you can't really, outdoing mastery is not good enough because the master always comes back. It has to be perpetual motion machine. Is highlighted by Nietzsche's unsettling question as to why we consider truth more important than deception. Why do we consider truth so valuable and more important than deception? This goes back to my discussion of the trick. His point being that truth itself cannot be truthfully justified, and that without the idea of truth, without the concept, without the fiction, you might say, of truth, there can be no deception. And he regards deception as the lifeblood of existence. And I quote, "For you only have to ask yourself carefully, why do you not want to deceive? Especially if it should seem, and it does seem, as if life aimed at semblance, meaning error, deception, simulation, delusion, self-delusion, and when the great sweep of life has always shown itself to be on the side of the most unscrupulous swindlers." That's in the gay science. That to me is sort of it's like quoting the Bible or something. You know, it's like a way of trying to hammer home a perception of power of the world as based on deception, and we all are part of this. And I want to read a little bit from my remarks on catastrophe. Watching President Trump in April, just a couple of weeks ago, in April 2019, denounce US Congresswoman Ilhan Omar as a sick monster was a frightening experience. His hate speech, amplified and protected by his bully pulpit, is mimetic beyond belief. He becomes what he denounces. Who's the sick monster? You might ask yourself. This comes from a man who several times claimed extremely unpatriotic, he adds, extremely disrespectful of our country. This comes from a man who several times claimed his flat feet to avoid the draft and could not have enough of denouncing John McCain as a loser even after McCain's death. McCain was a war hero. On being questioned, the president is unperturbed that his statements appear to have led to death threats against the congresswoman, who's Muslim. The memories of the killing of 50 Muslims by an Australian in Christchurch, New Zealand, a month back are still vivid. The president's performance is perfect for television. He seems so spontaneous. He so artfully rearranges reality, splicing amputated quotes to amputated quotes, which will be joined in a specially made video, be joined to flashes of videos, spliced to other flashes of videos. You can see where I'm going with this Metamorphic Sublime. What long ago was a revolutionary art style of montage in Weimar, Germany, with the communist John Hartfield using scissors and paste to rearrange script and images that appeared first in the capitalist press, has not only long been co-opted by advertising, but now, in our very own Weimar of 2019, has become ever more powerful, ever more shameless, ever more shamanic, reminding us not only of Carl Schmitt's notion of political theology, but of Schmitt's central idea that the exception, meaning breaking the rule, is far more interesting than the rule. Many media outlets, such as Fox News, chime in on the president's outbursts. But is he not a chimer too, a mimetic counterpoint to Fox and Fox's sibling newspaper, the New York Post, owned by Murdoch and Sons, spouting front page anti-Muslim bile? It is a dangerous moment. You feel the world tremble. And it has been like this for a while, at least since 9/11. There is no more ordinary. We are not living just another era, but another culture. Like shock victims however, we cannot process what is happening, and that applies both to the left and right of the political spectrum. Unbelievable, deliberately transgressive, like the pussy grabbing, which I take to be the defining act of this presidency. And with that, we are cast onto seas of a great nothingness, as when Nietzsche wrote on the death of God, who gave us the sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? What were we doing when we unchained this earth from the sun? Whither is it moving now? Whither are we moving? Away from all suns. Interpretations of this famous text are legion and change according to circumstance. Today, as I read it, it is the text for a radically new political style, congruent with, correlated with, joined to a radically altered natural environment. What I was talking about right at the beginning today. Are we not plunging continually, asks the text, backwards, sideways, forward, in all directions? Is there any up or down? Today, this continual plunging mirrors not only the natural but the political environment. That's what seems to me so incredible about our time. It is as if nature has actually become political and vice versa. In other words, there is a frightening mimetic parallel between nature and culture. Nietzsche's text on the death of God continues, are we not straying as through an infinite nothing? Do we not feel the breath of empty space? This empty space is what I call the unbelievable, demanding some sort of admission on our part, grudging, disorienting as it may be, that destructive forces can be creative, and mightily so.
I want to do this.
Oh, you can't hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, but the thing is, there's this kind of P sound. The plop, we call it the plop. It's a terrible monster. And with this thing, it should be...
I'm trying to finish now, anyway. No.
Sorry. But now the plop is gone, so it's not working.
Only you could do this. So I'm calling this that we live in a period which you cannot believe what is happening. And we cannot give words to what is happening. We're using the old language for something completely new. Maybe that's why I'm coming up with all this weird stuff on the board. And it seems to me that something that is overlooked, except by very few people I read, that destruction like 9/11, destruction like wars, chronic wars, acute wars, is always, or is very likely to be, sometimes, I have yet to figure this out, you help me, destruction is creative as well as destructive. And I think this is very much overlooked in all the critiques of fascism and also the alarm about the crazy weather. Only by daring to see the creative possibilities in destruction can we transmute, can we metamorphose, can we change that creativity into at least an approximation of what I call the mastery of non-mastery, which I take to be the breath, that is the breath of empty space. When Nietzsche says after what he calls the death of God, do we not feel the breath of empty space? That to me is like a code signal. I say, aha, it's all gone, the ultimate authority is gone. There's just left the breath of empty space. And I say, that's it. That's great. That's good enough. We can work with that. In fact, it's exactly what we need. Of course, it is more than daring on our parts that is required. The daring implies philosophical readjustment, as if we are barely awakening to what's been going on the last 20 years. We're living in a time of magic hour. Magic hour is the time of dusk or dawn, when the light is changing and forms acquire different shapes and intensities. Filmmakers like to make films at those hours of dawn and dusk. Animals of a certain sort, birds of a certain sort, reptiles and insects of a certain sort, like dawn and dusk. Fireflies, bats, that's their time. It's as if we are barely awakening, as if now is the magic time of dusk and dawn. It seems like we are in a trance and can barely see. We are, as Bataille once expressed the unrepresentable, we are at the apex of thought whose end jumps the rails on which it is travelling. I had a very ambitious talk for you guys, but I'm going to stop here because I think it's wrong for somebody to occupy a lot of space, but just to prove that I had a real talk for you. So what I've done is outline intellectual project, if you like. I would like to fill it out for you one day in more detail, but I think you have got enough to play with in the sandpit that is a lecture. So thank you very much for your keen attention.
Shall I say a few words?
Okay, now you can hear me.
Yeah. Nobody heard you all the time. But there was a shamanistic glow at the end of the sentence sometimes.
So you had to take it away.
I had to take it away. Actually, of course we are honored with your presence, and there's going to be questions now. So I don't know what I had prepared something with a very short intro, and somehow it would fit. But the questions are more important. Can I see any hands, people who have questions? Please give us.
Sure, there's a lot of questions.
But these questions might help you.
Well, there's a question down the... Sorry.
So Hugo is explaining that we don't have, for some reason I've been looking for it, we don't have a walking microphone. So you guys have to be, you'll have to talk.
Here, I've got someone down the front so I can...
You don't?
Question, what is the question? We can repeat it.
Yeah. Okay, then you have the honor to the people doing the technological trick.
I have very bad hearing, by the way.
I'll speak up. I was wondering about my nieces of my nieces and how
Yeah, of course.
that I was wondering if it's a thing of now or if in some way it always has been.
Mm-hmm,
I mean,
okay.
I understand that like with the development of certain technologies like film and the way that we consume a lot of images and that we're making images of images at times and things like that, that basically going to a concert, you just see phones everywhere. So that's maybe my nieces of my nieces in a way, because we're filming something that someone else has created through also imitating things that they have seen. But is there a possibility that even before all this technological evolution that this already existed and that we've forgotten about it, or that we just don't know about it because it wasn't documented the way that it is now?
No, they're very clear and super pertinent questions. So the question is, can you be a bit more explicit about mimesis of mimesis, and is it something that is largely or completely a result of modern visual technology? Did it exist before cameras? That sort of direction of questioning. And going back to the one example I gave you of Rouche's Les Metamorphic, and I talked about this encounter at the time of independence of the possessed persons and the person who can't be possessed but has the camera, and the fortuitous, if you like, meeting of those two technologies. So, what did I mean by mimesis of mimesis? I was thinking that I always go back to a tiny shred of evidence, which is when I showed Les Metamorphic or saw it the first time, the people I was with, and probably I myself felt, but I thought I could hear as well, when the governor gets out of the car, and you've just seen the egg in theatre, you might say, on the head, you've sort of, people go, it's very slight, but you get this sudden, you feel that people are, and you yourself feel this intake of breath. And this is my shred of evidence. I think at that moment there's a transformation of, I know it sounds highfalutin, but a transformation of self. That's when I think you suddenly become aware of the potential of mimesis itself to, quote unquote, become other, to leave your body and enter into some other really fascinating and weird space. So that's really where I think I like going with this mimesis of mimesis thing. It's like mimesis compacted, accelerated, and boom, takes you to when Benjamin says the kid pretending to be a windmill actually gets some of the power of the windmill for a second, or he says it's something, what does he say, the desire to become other. Well, you can't really become other, but you know, there's a sort of a sense in which you can, and you have to be also, of course, very, very careful with this sort of language and this sort of power. So that's what I meant by mimesis. To what degree is it dependent on the camera, the moving camera, and digital techniques and manipulation of images, which encompasses us so much. You know, I'm teaching in Venice. It's just unbelievable to me how many pictures are taken in 1 minute. You really think the buildings are going to crumble because they can't take all this picture taking. Everybody's taking pictures. I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of pictures by one person in 8 hours. So, did anything? And people love looking at other people's pictures, and the selfies are just incredible. I didn't even talk about the selfies, and I'm too old to get into that, but I'm sure there's a ton of material, a ton of philosophical thinking to be done on what does it mean? Why do people get such genuine enjoyment from taking pictures of themselves against something important or something they think of as striking or beautiful? I think it grabs that part of your question about something like mimesis of mimesis pre-modern technology. I would have thought most ritual is like that. And that could take you back to the beginning of humankind. Bataille has a polemic, an argument, if you like, about the animals painted on the caves in southern France, Lascaux, bison, birds, horses. And he says that this is a homage to animals that have been killed. Whereas if you, like me, you're a crass materialist, you'll think, oh, well, this is magic, and people do drawings of animals they want to kill. I mean, that's, I think, a sort of reflex take. And Bataille is interesting to me because he's basically saying, no. That's really crude thinking. This is a homage to killing. This is a homage to death. And I remember reading an ethnography on indigenous people in Newfoundland, off Canada, in the Atlantic, called Naskapi, Naskapi. And the author, Speck, his name is, Frank Speck, 1921, around there. He talks about when an indigenous person kills an animal, they sit by the animal, they sit by the corpse, maybe smoke a cigarette, blow the smoke on the animal, and maybe sing a song, and maybe dance, he says, around the animal. Now, I can't... John Berger has a book on drawing, or articles on drawing, and he talks about drawing his father's face shortly after he died. And he talks about, as he focuses in on the face and the lines on the face, he feels the father, I forget the exact words, but it's something like the father, it's not exactly coming alive, but his history is coming alive as he's drawing. So there's a bond, I would call it a mimetic bond between the pencil, the paper, the drawer, and the thing that is being drawn. Now, in those just in those examples, I think there is the type of mimesis which is what I think of as non-instrumental. Of course, anthropologists have always said everything is instrumental. You can't argue it. Instrumental explanations cover everything, so it's very hard. So, but Bataille says it's homage. It's not trying to get magic to kill, get more animals, which is the usual take on primitive people. You know, they're always hungry and all this sort of stuff. But I think of these as examples which touch on a different, this other aspect of mimesis, which is to become one with what is being represented in drawing, painting. This, of course, predates cameras, has nothing to do with the digital magic of digital technology. You might ask your question another way, you know. I was thinking, will digital technology enhance or destroy these sorts of capacities? At a side issue, and it's very much a side issue to me answering your question, I've been thinking a lot recently, the last couple of years, about Black Lives Matter. And I've been thinking about the taboo on making a picture of someone being killed and the taboo of making a picture of a dead person. Now, a lot of Black Lives Matter concerns people with cell phones taking pictures of police, maybe very close, shooting someone. Sometimes it's a police camera itself, rarely. And it's not restricted to white police killing black drivers, although that's the commonest manifestation. You know, gangs in Chicago sometimes post videos of their shootouts. So there's a lot to be thinking about here. But the one thing I wanted to think of with modern, the cell phone camera and the very powerful video cameras that now exist, is suddenly an incredible taboo has been lifted, seems to me, showing death and showing killing. You know, this is a topic for another talk, obviously, but I keep thinking about it too, because my understanding has been that the dead body in Northern European and US culture that's taboo. It was taboo. But then you look at the mother of Emmett Till, who's 14 years old, is shot by these white guys back in 55 for supposedly whistling at a white girl. You probably know the story. His mother gets a photograph of her son in the coffin, and I think that's very, very important. She was sort of breaking the taboo, but entering into another sphere of the sacred. But by doing that, she didn't regard that presumably. Anyway, I can't say any more. But concerning modern technology, breaking taboos, and the operation of the mimetic. I've been thinking a lot about that. With our present era is crazy. Really, the thing that one of the things I'm really most concerned with. That's all interesting and fun, and I think there's something important going on there. But to me, the really important thing is I can't get the words to express how I think that what we're living through now is unbelievable. I mean, literally unbelievable, and that our capacity to describe it, to do justice to it, is often really weak. Yeah. So this capacity to talk to catastrophe is what's on the agenda right now. Yeah. And just one more question, and then I'll go.
I see one in the back.
Are you going to shout, or do I do this?
Well,
here, you can come here.
I'll take this.
You can come here.
Yeah, that's fine.
Oh, okay.
All right. We manage.
don't. What's the P? The letter P. I can't hear. You'll have to. No, that's my hearing is very bad.
A question or quite innocent, but I would like a bit of furthering or elaboration.
Why don't I get up to where you are?
I think the easiest is we got two people saying a few things, and I saw there was one question there, there was one question here, and another person close by as well. So you three guys ask your question.
Okay. My first question is that regarding the image, does the person think of it as mimetic or something else? And then this one is probably another question, because can you further elaborate further your idea of mimesis, or how you anchor mimesis? Because I might be naive or innocent, like naive about my idea of mimesis, because there's an entire Western epistemological tradition of mimesis from Plato, Aristotle, and all of these things. And then and that mimetic theory has been debunked by modern expression theory as well. Yeah, and of course its relationship with postmodernity, your idea of metamorphic sublime, and its relationship to postmodern condition, because I think the crucial here is that the one that you mimesis and sublime have been really a very important category of analysis in postmodern theorizing, specifically of Jean Baudrillard's processional simulacra that challenges the idea of mimesis, a copy of copy but real than real, and as well as Frederick Jameson's on postmodernism's idea of sublime as a kind of a symptomatic of a radical eclipse of nature itself, because of its massiveness and globalization, and this idea of it's easier to think that it's the end of the world than to think of the end of capitalism.
You want to answer, or I give it all back?
No, sure. No, you can hear?
Yeah.
I know that basically of the Jameson. My question would be, my nieces has been considered a fake category, poor thinking, weak thinking, since Plato at least. And I think it's a very strong and real phenomenon which has been repressed for 2,000 years. So I have no problem with the absence, the denigration. Mimesis down, Mimesis up. It's real. It's the Jameson stuff and the Baudrillard, I mean, they're tricky and interesting, yeah. But Robin Bart, in that essay of his Death of the Author, for example, I don't know if this meets you head on, but he talks about, well, the author doesn't exist anymore. This is highly postmodern. The author is just like a vehicle through which a larger text or a larger force is operating. And he says, like in shamanism. Well, so I don't see, well, that's not a magnetic force, whether the author exists or not. But anyway, postmodernism trying to do away with these categories. Yeah, I'm not quite sure how to do real justice to your question, except I would point attention to what I think is a repression of a very powerful category. See, when the Lucy Guattari, like I said at the beginning, they dismiss mimesis as sort of rethinking. There's repetition, but there's difference. Well, I'm saying, sure, look at the Benjamin thing. He puts his finger on this magical quality, as I do. And that magical quality to me is not present in the Deleuze critique of mimesis. He calls it difference. And I'm saying, well, the difference has to do with that indrawing of breath that I was talking about. So I'd love to talk to you more because it's a long time since I've read Baudrillard, and it's a mischievous, book. He's trying to make you mad, he's trying to make you laugh because you think the copy is real, that there is no such thing as an original. I remember when I gave a talk years and years ago on mimesis, and Bernard Girard, the French violence and the sacred guy was there, and he got stuck in me and he said, do you think there's an original? Because I would say copy and original, and I was doing that partly just to simplify the discussion. But I remember very clearly it came down hard, this sort of Baudrillard mischief, that ties us in knots. Thank you very much. Great question. Here you go.
Thank you for the very interesting talk, and I've really enjoyed your work in general, especially your gallery. But my question is more basic. I was wondering about shamanism, and somebody mentioned the discomfort with the term. And I was wondering how, in your own work, you have seen shamanism evolve, both as concept and practice, and where do you see these two worlds, the post-9/11 modern technology, and at the same time, your work with shamans and shamanistic practices? Do they somewhere diverge, converge, they fuse into each other? So how do you make connections between these two seemingly different worlds of shamanism and this post-9/11
beautifully formulated, penetrating question. What I want to emphasize with the term shamanism is my discomfort, and secondly, with the term, and secondly, this comment composed of both faith and skepticism, which I talk about an art form of skilled revelation, of skilled concealment. And that's what I think you see with the Trump White House and the Fox News and so forth. I regard them, I know it sounds a bit corny, a bit cheap, but I regard them as shamanic. I call him the shaman in chief. And he's very skilled. I think people say he's a bit dimwit, and I think he's very skilled, bully, very skilled, stands there and outcomes and stuff, something completely opposite the next minute. I think it's wrong to underestimate that power. Why I'm uncomfortable with the term shaman is because it's become such a common term. Everybody's a shaman now. I know people who so many indigenous people who come to the city, and the middle class people, doctors and lawyers and so forth, flock to these shamanic seances because they're interested, because they have problems in their life and so forth. And I find myself very troubled by this because I feel it's sort of fake. But then I think back to my times in the southwest of Colombia, where every shaman and every person around says, well, shamans are fake, or shamans used to be, going back to Bolivia, shamans used to be really powerful and they had it, but now they're just imitating, and now they're just fakes. And I started to think, what am I saying? I'm saying these shamans in Bogota are not really shamans. They're kids who come from the forest and they tell these naive white people that they've got this shamanic power because they've got a dark skin or because they sing an Indian song and stuff like that. And then I had to catch myself because I thought, well, this is probably a very old discourse. The shaman who lived in this valley was probably saying that this guy's is fake. And this guy probably saying this one's fake. I think this attribution of falseness and trickery is as old as shamanism itself. One is never really sure. So my question is that I hate this neo-shamanic thing. I loathe it. At the same time, I recognize that I'm probably just repeating an old story. What should I do, Doctor? I think that, that's about it. I went to a good friend of mine died about 4 weeks ago, Carolee Schneemann, in upstate New York, and a group of people got together, about 20 people, 3 or 4 days later, and they formed sort of a circle standing, and they told stories about this person, and they were generally, humorous stories. A couple of them had letters, really moving letters about art. She was an artist, about art and integrity, and it was beautiful. And there was this old guy, not that old, not as old as me, but he was very tricky, and he got off the floor. It was tremendous effort, and he was dressed in black hat, black shirt, black pants, and he had a plastic bag, white guy, red face, and he pulled out of the plastic bag with great difficulty a paper plate, and it had writing on it, and then he had 2 eagle feathers, or they looked like eagle feathers, and he started reading the plate, but he had to keep turning it round because it was a circle, and he kept moving the feathers slowly as he was reading. I can't remember what he was saying, but it was incredibly moving. Sorry, I got it wrong. He had a plant seed about that big, and as you shake it, it goes. And then he puts it back in his bag, and he picks out another one even bigger. And at the same time, he's trying to read the writing that's going round and round about her life. And when he gets to the end, he puts the seeds down, and he picks up these 2 eagle feathers, and he bends over, he's got the plate in one hand, and he goes, "Go, Carolee, go!" Now, that's the first time in my life I've seen what I would call a shamanic, deep meaning piece of, I don't know what to call it. Yeah, but that's only once in my life that I've actually seen it. What I would say, yeah, that's real. It's real. Yeah. It took a long time for me to stay alive to see that.
Okay.
Do you want more? Or? Somebody's been asking for yeah, maybe, yeah. Are you going to go for the correct call? Yeah.
You mentioned sometimes truth and deception, and wondering, like most people still like have this very strong feeling that truth matters and that it's the feeling behind it. But we do hear some philosophers who try to emphasize on the fiction and the power of fiction, and trying to kind of create the fiction that we need to overcome this state of unbelievable, or just to build bridges, really, with reality. Like reality has become so unbelievable that we need to build fiction to get there. And I mean, I believe things like speculative creations, or just in general, using that to have a kind of instrumental relationship to fiction in order to create the reality we need. And I was wondering if you could comment on that, or maybe also what are the dangers and what are maybe the interesting part of it?
It's a hugely complicated, difficult topic, a very daring topic. It goes really to the heart. Why do we believe in truth, to be asked, when the whole history of the world is a history of deception, which I assume we're all involved in, when you write a book, need fiction in order to survive, or something like that. Is fiction the same as deception? Well, this is in the birth of tragedy, the second preface, written long after the book first came out, and maybe that helps us because it does refer to the stage, it does refer to tragedy, and the ability to need for us to analyze and think about our relationship to what's happening in a film, what's happening in a photograph, what's happening on the stage. Do we identify, do we disidentify? Aristotle has stuff on that. You probably know all about it. Aristotle, you identify with the characters of the tragedy, and you pity them, and through catharsis you're cleansed. And Brecht was so interesting about that, because the last thing he wants is identification. He wants to keep he wants to have that alienation effect, so you see how odd it all is. Okay. I won't tell you much. I was thinking about the term I used, re-enchantment of nature, that we are now living in an epoch of re-enchantment of nature, but we don't see it that way. We don't see it that way partly because of our secular language to discuss environment. Our heroes in talking about environment tend to be pretty technical and talk about 1 degree or 1 degree difference will make in the world in 20 years' time, and they can list all sorts of things about fossils and this and that and the other. And the word enchantment seems to be on the side of the mystifiers and the dangerous anti-science people. So they use the term with some fear. Given this, Nietzsche uses a bunch of words there. Deception is one of them, dissimulation is one of them, semblance seems to be the least worrying one. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these That's the world he wants to touch. And I was thinking, why don't I replace the phrase "enchantment of nature" simply with the word art? It occurred to me when I was thinking about that, and having doubts along the lines of your question. It's interesting what you say about fiction and preach. I always, I taught in performance studies for 3 or 4 years, and I had this phrase in the back of my mind after a while, the real being really made up. It's another paradox, then I saw this thing in Derrida about the separation between fiction and non-fiction. Separation between fiction and non-fiction is a necessary fiction. And I think that's the sort of thing we're talking about. So we live in a world where we're deceiving ourselves. And that is good.
Whatever we made up really matters.
I think you get to the point where you can't say yes or no. What you've got at the mastery of non-mastery is the beginning of an endless inquiry. You're questioning yourself or you're questioning whoever it might be. It's not so much that there is no answer. It's a continuous debate. I don't know, that's how I'll weasel out of it. Okay, thanks so much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. This was a CARAM, Center for Anthropological Research on Affect and Materiality spring lecture. We were so happy with your. We did think. I don't think we made publicity about it, so it must have been word of mouth that led you here, except for some students. So, Mick, you're sending us home with some. Actually, I have to say, deep thoughts, because you touched on everything, every corner of human existence. And you've actually, you're.
Come on, be careful.
Yes. Well, I'm not exaggerating because a dozen seminal books published by this man do cover about every little part of human experience by now.
I think they all say the same thing.
And maybe that's the story about. Maybe so. Mick just said he thinks the books are repeating something. They're mimicking each other, perhaps, but. Maybe that's the story of the earth as well. Maybe there's an eternal return after all. I'm not going to have the last word. The last word is to you guys. Please give me another little hand of applause to this great man.